And a very pleasant good evening to everyone. I am Biff Kensington, and you are tuned in to the last call. Here it is. It's Sunday morning now. It's just after midnight on April the 29th, 2018. I am Biff Kensington. It's a big night for the show for a number of reasons, not the least of which, of course, tonight is the drawing for our Queen City Express Ultimate Trivia Challenge. If you've been listening to the show over the last month, you know that we've been asking a series of trivia questions, giving people a chance to submit the answers to our show's email, and the contestants that answered the questions correctly were entered into a drawing for a prize pack of WrestleMania souvenirs. Had a program from the show, a poster, a hat, and a commemorative cup. Everything total was a little bit over $50. So it's a nice little pile of swag that we had here in the drawing. Uh, first week, first week we only had a handful that signed up, but over time it grew. Some people from our parent site, as it were, Cage Side Seats. Some others just from happening across the show somehow on YouTube, and others from friends of the show here locally. And before we get to the actual drawing, I do want to address something. Uh, this is as much a shout out to a friend of the show as anything. Uh, this has not been the easiest thing for me to do. Uh, Very few people know some of the stuff that's going on right now in my personal life, and even fewer know some of the things that I've struggled with over the last couple of years. And I've had a couple of friends, very close friends, that have really helped me and encouraged me through the creation of these shows. They think it's almost therapeutic in a way for some of the stuff that we've gone through. One of my closest friends, actually one of the people we went to New Orleans with, has been a big inspiration here. Made it a point to listen to every show, gives feedback. Just been really, really kind. Really, really love that guy. He's one of my best friends in the whole world. Um, Adam, this show's for you, bud. I just want to just take a moment to dedicate this show. I know it's a completely trivial gesture, but I know what you're going through right now is absolutely terrible, and so I just wanted to let you know that we're thinking about you. That we love you, buddy. I thank you for everything that you've done, not just for this show, obviously, but for everything else. My friend lost his daughter recently. Uh, it's an unfortunate circumstance. Uh, it's, you know, sometimes there are no words to go into a tragedy like this. It's hard to know what to even say. But I just want to dedicate this show to my friend and his family and his fiance, especially going through this time right now. Uh, it's just been a really rough week for a lot of people here locally, and I just want to thank everyone that stuck with it over the last couple of weeks. Thank everybody for the kind words that they've had in response to the show. Hasn't been a very popular show, but we have some listeners, and they tune in every once in a while. And if you found this show from surfing YouTube, if you were one of the people that I shared it with down in New Orleans, or a local friend here, or if you're from Cage Side Seats, just want to thank you for tuning in, and thank you for everything that you've done to help make this show, something special. So tonight we're going to be doing the Ultimate Trivia Challenge drawing. We do have that nice pack of gear here for you. This will be the last trivia challenge associated with the actual Queen City Express show here on Saturday night, because this is the last show on Saturday night. This is the last episode of The Last Call. Uh, it's fun to do these shows. I'm glad that people enjoy it, but between the show that we normally do on Thursday and the brand new show, The Connoisseurs of Wrestling, which I co-host along with my good buddy Taker's Minion. There's just a lot of content out there, and there's so many shows to get to that there's really no need for this Saturday night show. So this will be the last regular episode. We can still come back from time to time if we ever have something special to bring up, or if there's a special event on Saturday, maybe a preview of a major show for New Japan. We do have a minor show. I believe it's tomorrow morning. I may be mistaken on that. I believe it's the Intercontinental title match between Naito and Minoru Suzuki, if I am not mistaken. It's been such a hectic day, I could be completely oblivious to what's actually going on tomorrow. So don't verify that through this show. Please do your research on Google. But there are some important New Japan shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. And so it'll be fun to kind of get back on here and talk about New Japan for a little while. Today's episode will be mostly geared towards WWE. Of course, we had the Greatest Royal Rumble event in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, on Friday. A lot to talk about there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get this drawing out of the way. So here's how it works. Some of you, when you contacted me via Twitter, you went ahead and submitted your personal information. That's fine. Some of you didn't, and that's fine too. I'm going to read off the name that was on the email itself. That's how I basically marked it down for the drawing. It was a little bit easier than writing out the whole emails. You don't have to do anything. I've got all of your email addresses saved, so as long as you haven't deleted your email addresses in the last 3 or 4 weeks, however long it's been now, there's not going to be any problem with me reaching out to you. I will be sending you an email tomorrow morning, probably tomorrow morning, because I will actually be heading out for some personal business here when this show is done. But tomorrow morning, I'll be getting in touch with you. We'll get all the mailing address stuff squared away, and you don't have to worry about paying anything. There's absolutely no cost. It's all on me. It's just kind of a thank you for listening to the last call. There will be continued trivia challenges on the regular edition of the Queen City Express for as long as we do those shows. So we will be continuing these contests periodically. The next drawing will be in June, around the middle of June. We got actually a very special prize set up there. It's a 6-month WWE Network gift card for you. It's I know there's a lot of promotions for free months and everything, but if you are already a subscriber to the network, you're going to get yourself a nice little bonus here. 6 months of content that'll take you through the summer pay-per-views like SummerSlam, and it'll get you on towards the Survivor Series and up towards the Rumble. So that'll be our next drawing. That'll be a little bit later on this spring. Not exactly sure on the date yet. I know it's going to be in the middle of June. Got to actually buy the gift card here at some point. But for the drawing tonight, of course, just to recap it here, we have a WrestleMania cap that we've got here. It's actually quite a beautiful cap. It is adjustable in the back, so it should fit all head sizes. We've also got a really cool WrestleMania poster. Has all the matches from New Orleans on it. It's quite a big poster. I haven't measured it out, but it's a very beautiful poster. Quite like it. Bought one to keep for myself, actually. So we have a poster for you. We also have a WrestleMania souvenir cup that was purchased. This was actually kind of an interesting story. I don't even know if I've told this or not. The cup itself was actually purchased leaving the Superdome. They were closing down the concession stands, and I was able to actually snag one of these. So you're not getting a cup that's been drank out of. Don't worry, you're not going to get my cooties or anything. We got a nice little souvenir cup. It's a nice size cup, probably 16 to 20 ounces. It's one of those big souvenir cups that you can get. And a WrestleMania program. WrestleMania program has got some information on the matches that took place in New Orleans. It has a little section for the roster for the company. as of WrestleMania, and it's also got some cool posters from the WrestleMania events up to WrestleMania 34. And then if you flip the book over, it's got a section for the WWE Hall of Fame. And so you have all sorts of stuff there on the Hall of Fame inductees over the years. It's a really great book. It's not a small book. It's not your typical program. It's not like the size of a magazine. It's almost a coffee table book. It's not too awful thick, but it's big. So it's going to definitely be more of a coffee table book than something you'll just stick on a bookshelf. All in all, it's a very cool package of stuff. I doubled up on some of it so I could have some mementos myself, but this is definitely for everyone involved. But again, if you are entered into the contest, we will be drawing here momentarily. I have your names as they appeared in the emails that I received. But again, I will be contacting the winner directly. Obviously, we don't have too many people watching live now, so a lot of people will probably find this out either after the fact or from the email that I send to the winner. But let's go ahead and get this done. You are pleased to note this is actually a bag from the Mass General Store, one of my favorite little stores that I used here. And by the way, I just wanted to let my good friend Eddie know, another friend of the show. No, Eddie, you are not eligible for this. I'll take you out to lunch this week or something to make up for that. And so here we go. Let me rustle it around here a little bit. And the first winner of our Ultimate Trivia Challenge is John Tracy. John Tracy, congratulations, buddy. You have won the WrestleMania gift pack from New Orleans at the Superdome. I'll be sending you an email here a little bit later on tonight, early in tomorrow morning. I will get everything squared away with you. But John Tracy wins our very first Ultimate Trivia Challenge contest. So congratulations, John. Thank you very much for listening to the show. And again, we'll be doing more of these contests in the weeks to come. The next drawing won't be until the middle of June, but we'll begin the contest probably as early as this coming week for the WWE Network gift card. But John will be looking forward to getting that gear out to you. And I don't know if you recall this, but I did post a special little note. If you post pictures of this swag on your Twitter and link back to the show, you'll get a special WWE gift card on top of this information. So just a little heads up there. But I'll go over all that in the email. So congratulations and thank you for everyone that entered. We had 14 entries overall over the last couple of weeks, and we had some from Cage Side Seats. We had some that were from just random viewers on YouTube. We had some local friends of the show that joined in. It's just, it's a real pleasure to be able to bring this kind of stuff to you. It makes me feel good that people are actually enjoying these shows and listening and taking the time to go back and listen to them. So thank you again for everyone who participated. It's all about getting that wrestling knowledge out there. That's one of the goals for the Wrestling Connoisseurs podcast that Taker's Mania and I began. And that's as good a segue as any to get into the plugs coming up here. Of course, the Connoisseurs of Wrestling podcast takes place. It's recorded every Monday, and it generally drops between noon Monday and noon on Tuesday. There will be a more finalized time as we kind of get more details worked out on the show. But very good episode this past week, the most viewed podcast I've ever done. And I know that Taker had a good time doing it as well. Talking about the Jumping Bomb Angels, a very, very solid, very memorable tag team from the 1980s, both from the Joshi Puro scene or from WWF, if you remember, from 87 and 88. Pioneers of women's wrestling here in the States were the Jumping Bomb Angels. This coming week, our show is focused on the late, great Bruno Sammartino, he who was known as the living legend. during his lifetime. The late, great Bruno Sammartino is the focus of our show. We'll be recording that Monday. We'll be getting that out to you. There will be another post with some special information on Cage Side Seats. If you listen to this show and have not checked out Cage Side Seats, definitely give it a check. It's worth your time. It's a great place. All sorts of wrestling content there. A ton of podcasts. Right now, there's just so many people with so many excellent shows out there. You can pretty much find a good show every day of the week for your wrestling hookup if you need a little fix to get you between the shows. Cage Side has that, in droves. So a special shout out to Cage Side Seats. Visit us in the nightly thread and the daily thread. Give me a shout if you see me there. I'm at Biff Kensington. You can follow me on Twitter at RealDealBiff. There's also information down in the info box on that. Let us know if you're coming there for the first time listening to the show. It'd be great to see you over there. And again, a special shout out to all the Cage Side Seats members who do check out these shows on the regular. Give a couple of plugs here. We got Two Guys, One Sport. Chris and George, they do an excellent job on their show. Of course, the Ruthless Aggression Era podcast, Metal Matt, Full Metal, my good buddy. He's been really knocking it out of the park. He'll have another show up this coming Friday. Of course, he does some special shows here and there too. Fizzy has the Wacky World of Wrestling. He had a show completed this afternoon, if I'm not mistaken. You can check that out. Still waiting to hear about Knox and Ambrose Alley's Violent Wrestling podcast. Hopefully that'll be coming back soon. Wednesday Night Shooting with Tanya Rogers and Andrew Swift is definitely worth a listen, as is the two shows handled by Miss Monroe and Friends, Ringside Geeks and For the Love of Wrestling. And, of course, we have the Cage Side Seats Podcast Family Direct with Not Your Demographic, The Bitter Boys Club, Bros Before Elbows, and Keeping Up with Kayfabe. All of those can be found through CageSideSeats.com. And, of course, we have the Godfather himself, Taker's Minion, joined by Doc Senju with the Shooting Debris podcast. That drops every Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Eastern Standard Time. For the Big Four pay-per-view weekends, they do go an hour early, but generally you can find them 11 a.m. on YouTube. You can check out their channel and subscribe there. Of course, the aforementioned Connoisseurs of Wrestling show with Taker's Minion and myself, that drops early in the week. And the parent show to this show, the Queen City Express with Biff Kensington, myself, and Ryan Sayo. That drops 4 p.m. Thursdays Eastern Time. You can find it right here on this very channel here on YouTube. So thank you to everyone again that listens. Please check out some of these other podcasts. There's just so many. You'll definitely have yourself a good time. We're going to talk for a few minutes here about some of the happenings from the Greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. It is definitely a show that had a lot of hype and a lot of controversy surrounding it, but also a show that really in the end was nothing more than a house show. If you have not seen it, there are spoiler alerts for you. There will be the results of the show given out here tonight. So if you haven't seen it, definitely you might want to go ahead and go back and watch that show if you're planning on doing it, and then come back and check us out later. Show opened with John Cena and Triple H. John Cena picking up the win. Not a big shock. It's just kind of to get the crowd excited, see two big names there. Very methodical, slow-paced match. Kind of an old-school match the way they work this. John Cena eventually hit an AA, then used a slingshot into the corner, hit another AA, and got the pin. Inoffensive match, nothing too special, but it was fine for what it was. Really good cruiserweight title match. Cedric Alexander, Queen City's favorite son, and a favorite here of the Queen City Express podcast. Maybe not the best of donut choices, but that's neither here nor there. He retains his title, defeats Kalisto. A very good match. Kalisto, a lot of people forget how good he really is. Kalisto can have some really good matches. He kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit on 205 Live, but he got a chance to shine here. He looked excellent. Cedric Alexander, of course, continues to be one of the best workers in the world. And so Cedric does retain his title here in Jeddah. This is kind of the theme that would develop over the course of the show. A lot of titles being retained. We move on to the Raw Tag Team titles. Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy, the leader of worlds, are the new Raw Tag Team Champions. They are the only people to win titles on this show, and that was kind of a given considering the titles were held in abeyance beforehand. They defeat the Bar. Match was nothing too awful special, just kind of there. But for those who enjoy the work that Bray and Matt have been putting in, they do have the tag titles now, and they will be the centerpiece of the tag division on Raw. We'll just have to wait and see who they build around. Of course, they have the Authors of Pain in the division now. We also have the Show, Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre. That appears to be a formal team moving forward. And we also have the possibility of a tag team with Braun Strowman and Bobby Lashley. They had a really great match on Monday night. We'll have to see if that becomes a more formal team or if that was just kind of a one and done. But the World Tag Title scene, definitely interesting. Bray Wyatt, Matt Hardy are your new tag team champions. We move straight into another title match featuring a Hardy brother. Jeff Hardy retains his title, the U.S. title, against Jinder Mahal. This match was not good. Not a great big shock. They have not had a lot of good matches on pay-per-view for poor Jinder Mahal over the last year. This one is noteworthy for a really terrible botch. This was a really sloppy show in general. There were quite a few botches. One which stands out, we'll get to momentarily in the Rumble itself, but there were several botches throughout the night. Commentary was not Michael Cole's best night. He had several botches, including saying poor Sergeant Slaughter had passed away. Have no fear, Sergeant Slaughter fans. He's still among the land of the living. But just not a good night for commentary. Here in this match, Jeff Hardy, of course, missed a whisper in the wind off the top rope. Can't really put this on Jeff. I kind of take the opinion of Jason Solomon of the Solomon Monster Sounds Off podcast. He had a recap of the show. I'm pretty much in agreement with him. It's on Jinder for being out of position here because once Jeff starts the move, it's kind of hard for him to correct, taking flips off the top. Maybe he rushed the move a little bit, but Jinder being out of position definitely did not help. And then Jinder sold the move, despite it missing by a solid 2 feet, 2 seconds after the move itself. And so it just looked terrible. Just kind of an embarrassing spot there. Thankfully for Jinder's sake, that there was a bigger botch on the show that kind of overshadowed it. But otherwise, this would have definitely been the low point of the night. Jeff Hardy retains the U.S. title, and it would appear that the U.S. title will be the mid-card title remaining on SmackDown. That comes, of course, after the Intercontinental title ladder match between Samoa Joe, The Miz, Finn Balor, and Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins, of course, defending the title going into the night. And he comes out of the night with the Intercontinental title after a really nifty spot where he kind of leaped onto the ladder and beat Finn up it in order to get the title before Finn could pull it down. It was a very inventive spot. The match itself was nothing special. Your garden variety car crash ladder match. The New Orleans ladder match from NXT was worlds ahead of it, so you're not missing much. But definitely an interesting finish. It was technically fine. There wasn't anything too awful wrong with it. SmackDown tag title match. The Bludgeon Brothers retained their titles against the Usos. This was kind of a nothing match. It was okay for what it was. I believe this was the spot where Michael Cole declared Sergeant Slaughter no longer among the land of the living. So Sergeant Slaughter, again, will have to say a few words to Michael Cole the next time that they meet. But the Bludgeon Brothers retain the tag titles and are apparently on to greener pastures. We'll have to see where the tag title feud will wind up going on SmackDown, but the Usos, of course, losing their rematch here. We'll just have to see if they're out of the title picture moving forward. Of course, we have Backlash coming up next week. Could have another match with them. You never know. The storyline with Naomi, that obviously could not progress thanks to the, well, shall we say, lack of progressive policies towards women competing at this show in Saudi Arabia. That's actually kind of an interesting point that we'll get to here in just a moment about interview package that took place during the prayer break. They did have an intermission. It was not really labeled as such, but there was an intermission for the people who needed to pray. They took about 15 to 20 minutes or so through to some backstage interviews, a couple of video packages and stuff of that nature. We had the kickoff panel doing some talking spots here during this intermission with Byron Saxton leading it since Renee was not able to be there. We had Jerry Lawler, Booker T, and Jim Ross. Jim Ross made the trip to the show here. This was, say what you will about the prayer break. That's fine. The video package that was played about the government and its, progressive mentality, that was a little less appetizing. It really reeked of propaganda, to be quite honest, because that's what it was. It was propaganda. And knowing the government's response to the video package that showed, I believe, either Carmella or Sasha Banks during this broadcast, it was apparently aired over the big screen in the stadium, and it got a huge cheer from the crowd. They called it indecent, and they complained about it after the fact and apologized for the indecency of seeing a female wrestler. So not a good look for WWE. It's a bit of a PR boondoggle here that they've kind of fallen into. We move on, of course, after the intermission. We did have the ladder match for the Intercontinental title. Seth Rollins retaining that title. We get into the world title matches. The WWE Championship match went first. AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. They had a better match than they had in New Orleans. It still wasn't quite on the level that they would wrestling at in New Japan. I really believe Shinsuke Nakamura, he's probably either kind of trying to conserve his body a little bit, or maybe just injuries and the years in the ring have kind of caught up to him, because he's not wrestling at the same pace that he once did. He's getting a little bit older, and he's got some mileage on him. He's had some injury concerns over the years. So this was a good match, not quite a great match. It was better than New Orleans, but the finish was just god-awful. The finish here really flat, a double count out. But at the same token, we're getting a rematch again 1 week from later tonight, actually. Next Sunday is Backlash, the next official pay-per-view on the schedule. You can kind of consider the Greatest Royal Rumble more of a network special. Backlash will be a more traditional pay-per-view. The first pay-per-view that is co-branded, according to WWE. This despite the fact that we just saw some interbrand matches on the Greatest Royal Rumble show. And so take that for what you will. But it is being advertised as the first co-branded pay-per-view, Backlash, a week from Sunday. AJ and Nakamura will wrestle for a third time, and we'll see if they pull the switch on and pull the trigger on a title change there or not. A lot of interesting moving parts to SmackDown's upper card scene. You got Big Cass and Daniel Bryan kind of mixing it up. Samoa Joe and The Miz are kind of waiting in the wings here to see what happens. You still got Randy Orton, who looks to be in the midst of a heel turn. He'll probably be feuding with Jeff Hardy at some point. We have Andrade Cien Almas coming up. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of interesting things about SmackDown. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. But so far, it does seem that the changes they have made through the Superstar Shakeup have been positively received. Last Tuesday's show was very well received, I thought. And it was a decent show. It had its parts where it dragged, but overall, I like the direction they have with some of their top talent. And Shinsuke Nakamura, definitely one of the most entertaining parts of the show. He will be a pivotal part of SmackDown moving forward, whether it was with the title or through some other means. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of him in the upper card. AJ Styles, very credible WWE champion, had a heck of a run. And it does continue after Saudi Arabia, a double count-out finish, title obviously remaining with AJ. He wasn't the only champion retaining. As we mentioned earlier, the only championship that really changed hands was the Raw Tag titles. And, of course, that means that Brock Lesnar is still your Universal Champion. Controversial finish, a really weird finish. Some confusion over whether this was a botched finish or not. If you haven't seen the show, basically what ended up happening, it was a repeat of WrestleMania for the most part. It was not a good match between the two. I guess it would be a little better than the WrestleMania match, but This match, again, was mostly finisher spam. Roman did get the upper hand in this one. The end of the match came when Roman had Brock on the apron nearest the aisleway. So the side of the ring that's basically flush with the entranceway. Brock was standing on the apron inside the steel cage. Roman spears him through the ropes. They go through the cage in a really impressive visual. The cage wall kind of collapses back into the aisleway. Both Roman and Brock fall through. Brock's back but hits the floor first while he's on the mesh. Roman kind of rolls on top of him, and Brock is declared the winner. Although it is interesting to note that Roman's feet actually hit the ground first, and that's generally the rule of thumb in cage matches. Both feet must hit the floor. So controversial ending. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out. As of right now, Brock Lesnar is not scheduled to appear at Backlash, so there will probably not be a Universal title rematch at that show. It would have to come a little bit later, one of the next shows. We'll just have to wait and see as far as the Universal Championship picture goes. But Brock Lesnar does retain, and despite the controversial finish, despite the fact that some people believe Roman Reigns should have won, it will go down as another loss for the big dog. He does not bring the title home from Saudi Arabia. This marks the third time in the last year that Brock Lesnar has defeated Roman Reigns. He pinned him clean in the middle of the ring during the Fatal 4-Way at SummerSlam last August in Brooklyn. We then move on to WrestleMania, where he pinned him again clean in the middle of the ring after, 6 F5s? And then we also have the cage match in Saudi Arabia, which, despite the controversial finish, again, it is the final ruling of the referee. Referee's ruling is final, so Brock Lesnar does retain. It doesn't seem to be any way around that. And it really begs the question, where are they going with Roman Reigns? We'll talk about that here just a little bit with the fallout of this show. We did have the Royal Rumble, the 50-man Royal Rumble. It main evented the show. The winner would be getting a title belt. It's kind of a variant of the WWE Championship. It has a specialized plate, kind of Saudi themed for the theme of the show itself. There's also a trophy. So a trophy and a belt were the prizes here. 50-man Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler started the match. Daniel Bryan would go all the way to the end of the match. He was the next to last person eliminated. The match did end with Braun Strowman knocking Big Cass out of the ring to win the event. Braun Strowman set the single elimination record for a Rumble match. He had 13 eliminations in a single match. That will be the official record moving forward. They're treating this Rumble apparently as though it is part of the canon of Royal Rumble matches. So even though he did it with 20 more participants, still, the eliminations that Braun had will count as the most ever for a single Rumble match. And I'm not really too upset about that because you remember a couple of years ago, they did have a 40-man Royal Rumble. So this is not the first time they've deviated from the 30-man Rumble format. Of course, the very first official Royal Rumble back in 1988 was a 20-man Rumble. Then they progressed to 30, and that's kind of been the sweet spot, the lion's share of the time. But we did have a 40-man Rumble, and now this 50-man Rumble. So as far as, it not being fair, that's just the way it is. But Braun will be the record holder moving forward. We have another record holder, Daniel Bryan, the longest time in the Rumble match, an hour and 16 minutes at my count. That is by far the longest time spent in a Rumble. It's also the longest time spent in a Rumble for someone that did not win the Royal Rumble. Of course, Bryan entered at number 1, but he was eliminated by Big Cass shortly before Cass was eliminated. Speaking of the botches earlier, there were two in particular. One colossal botch, very funny, with Titus O'Neil that we'll talk about. Of course, Big Cass had a very scary moment. Bobby Lashley attempted to do his delayed vertical suplex on Big Cass. Could not get him up all the way. And then uh, Big Cass, apparently Bobby just felt the need to drop him on his head. And so it brainbustered him for all intents and purposes. Cass looked like he was out of it for a little bit. Hopefully he's okay. It was a very scary spot. It was not intended to be a brainbuster, but it's kind of what ended up happening. So that was kind of scary towards the end of the match. But of course, the botch that everyone is going to remember this show for, poor Titus O'Neil. I'm not a fan of Titus. I think he's a pretty bad wrestler. Not a fan of Titus Worldwide in the least. But this made everybody laugh for a long time on Friday. People are still watching clips from this today. If you didn't see it, it's on Deadspin. You can find it there. What basically wound up happening was poor Titus, he was running down the ramp to get into the ring. And about, I would say, 5 or 6 feet from the ring, apparently his toe caught on one of the mats. And it caused him to stumble forward. And he basically took a head dive under the ring. He slid from the floor mat underneath the apron, right into the ring and out of sight. Corey Graves just lost it. He completely corpsed on the air. He was busting out laughing for a good minute or so. Of course, people in the back replayed it for the live audience about 15 times. So poor Titus, forever be known as Titus World Slide. He will definitely not live that down anytime soon, but that'll probably keep him around. That'll give him some degree of fame, even if it is kind of infamy. A funny botch, a much more desirable botch than the Jinder Mahal botch from earlier in the night or the Big Cass failed suplex. But again, this show, I don't know if it was people just not putting in their top effort or what, but there were just so many mistakes from commentary to missed moves in the ring. It just was not a good night for work rate in general. A lot of kind of uncomfortable mistakes on the show. Of course, the finish of the match did come down to Big Cass, who came out at 49, I believe it was, and Braun Strowman, who came out at 41. Braun Strowman eliminated Big Cass off of the top rope. He gets the win. Kind of a big spot here in the match. Roddy Strong from NXT came up. He and Daniel Bryan engaged in a chop fest, and poor Bryan, his chest was just mutilated, all scratched up and red. Just looked gnarly. He even had some scrapes on his arm, where they just chopped the crap out of each other. So hopefully he's okay. It didn't seem to be any lasting injury. It's just not going to be a comfortable one to deal with. Probably the more interesting spot of the Rumble itself, poor Shane McMahon. He did go coast to coast with a Van Terminator, as it used to be called in ECW, I believe it was Braun Strowman that he hit. Then he tried to do it on Kevin Owens, but Braun caught him and he threw him out of the ring off the top rope onto the ringside announce table. Looked like a very painful spot. Poor Shane. All that he's been through the last couple of weeks, health-wise, having to get out there and destroy himself. But kudos to him. He was a trooper. He took his beating like a man. Chris Jericho and Rey Mysterio were pretty much the biggest two returning legends for this match. We also had Hornswoggle come out for a guest spot. Sumo guy that I had never heard of. You'll have to look around to get information on him. I don't even have his name off the top of my head. He was in, did kind of a power spot with Mark Henry, complete nothing. This match really was not that good for the lion's share of it. Really, the last 40 minutes of the show is where things kind of picked up. The first half of the match was basically just scrubs. It was just a bunch of enhancement talent, lower card guys. It didn't really mean anything. They're just kind of mixing it up. Bryan and Dolph were kind of wrestling around them for the most part. As we got towards the latter part of the match, we started seeing some bigger names kind of pop in. We did have the New Day early on. That was a little bit of fun, but it wasn't until we got kind of into like the late 20s and 30s where we started seeing the main event talent start to appear in the match. But Braun Strowman does end up picking up the win, the most eliminations in a single Rumble. He wins the trophy, he wins the belt, and he got a big pyrotechnic show after the event was over. Of course, Vince McMahon was there with one of the Saudi crown princes, apparently, uh, for the trophy presentation. So Braun Strowman goes off the air looking like the big hero of the night for WWE. He's standing tall at the end. That's the last visual we see of the greatest Royal Rumble. It's pretty much a house show, an oversized house show to be sure. It was a very, uh, I kind of enjoyed the presentation in terms of an aesthetic with the show. The entrance looked really cool. It was a cool atmosphere. The stadium itself was really beautiful. The crowd was a little distracting at times. There was obviously some people in the floor section that were not there of their own volition. They were definitely there with other people and had no interest in giving any shits about this show. And they actually changed the camera angle at one point from their normal hard cam angle to a more of a low angle at ringside, filming the action going on in the ring. And I wonder if that wasn't related to the crowd just not being a very active crowd in the floor section. The crowd itself was interesting. It was not very loud during most of the night. They were up for John Cena and Triple H. They were quite into that match, but after that, the crowd kind of died out. There really wasn't much in the way of crowd participation for the rest of the night. Poor Roman Reigns. He got cheered for his entrance, but then after, during the ring introduction, he got booed. It was almost like a normal crowd response for him. So even in Saudi Arabia, poor Roman can't get a true babyface pop. And that kind of ties into the next point of discussion, which is on the face of the WWE. Roman Reigns, of course, has been the presumptive face of the company. Been waiting for him to kind of explode into that role over the last 4 years. And here in the last year in particular, but really over the entire course of his run, it just has not happened. Roman is just not connecting with a large part of the audience. Some weeks it's 50-50, some weeks it's better, some weeks it's worse. But if we go off the baseline that 50% of the paying customers don't want him in this role, that's half your audience that's not playing along with the script. But even just taking out fan reactions, just looking at the results, we talked a little bit last week about how badly Roman has been mangled with his booking, just losing so much. This is the third time he's lost to Brock Lesnar. This time is a controversial loss, of course, but I just don't know how many people actually want to see this match back again for a fourth time. This feud is just death for everyone involved. It's making everyone less popular, it seems. So we need to be looking ahead. I don't think there's any real controversy in saying that Roman's time as top babyface is pretty much over with. There's just no way to really salvage him at this point. He's going to have to turn heel. That's the only way they could really make this work. If they try to put the title on him now, it's just going to go over like crotch rot. You just can't do it at this point. He's lost too many times. He's been lugered so much. It's just unfortunate what's happened to Roman Reigns. It's really not even his fault. It's a lot on WWE for their mismanagement. But perception is reality, and the perception is he's a loser. He loses too many big matches. And so Roman Reigns is not going to be the guy they have to lean on. They're going to have to go some other direction. Now, will that be Braun Strowman or will that be Seth Rollins? Very interesting. Braun Strowman is definitely one of the most popular performers they have in the company right now. If you listen to the Shooting the Breeze podcast earlier this morning, we talked about Braun Strowman and kind of how he's taking over the role of the Undertaker or Kane in the sense of that big, larger-than-life character. He's obviously not of the Undertaker archetype. He doesn't have a supernatural vibe necessarily, but he does have that kind of that really larger-than-life persona that kind of makes him a little bit closer to the Undertaker than he would be a Roman Reigns or a Seth Rollins. I think that's what really distinguishes Braun Strowman from his peers right now. He feels like a throwback to an earlier era. He's definitely more larger than life, that outsized wrestling persona that we kind of grew up on, those long-time fans still watching. Whereas Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, even Finn Balor to an extent, and AJ Styles, they feel more like common guys that are just successful. It's really hard to put that into words. Roman, he's not what you would call an outsized personality. He's basically just an athlete. He's an ex-football player that started wrestling, and he's had a lot of success. Seth Rollins is just a wrestler. Finn Balor is just a wrestler. Now, his demon persona, that can kind of, stray more into that theatrical avenue, the sports entertainment side of pro wrestling, if you will. But he really hasn't used the demon persona in so long now. I would question whether or not it's actually been retired from his repertoire. Uh, AJ Styles, same thing. He's not really an outsized personality. He's just kind of a wrestler that's there. It's a very relatable roster in that respect. These guys, they're not, cartoon characters like we saw in the 80s. But that's why Braun sticks out. He's a cartoon character among ordinary people. And if you watched, I brought this up this morning, I'll bring it up again, the tag match that he had with Bobby Lashley on Raw last week. He was the most popular guy in the entire arena by far. The only person in the company that's really rivaling Braun Strowman's popularity would be a Daniel Bryan. And even now, I think it could be a close toss-up as to who might be the most popular. Bryan gets loud reactions, and he does have heat for his matches. But even Bryan is not getting the kind of reactions during his matches that Braun Strowman is. Strowman is super hot. He's white hot right now. And of course, standing tall in Saudi Arabia to close out the show, that's definitely going to be an interesting point to see if they put him in a more featured position moving forward. He's kind of been spinning his heels the last couple of months to let Roman and Brock do their thing in the main event picture. Could be time for Braun to move up. The crowd would definitely get behind him, and he would definitely be a serviceable champion. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Can Braun Strowman be the face of the company? This entirely depends on how he's presented. Now, as he has been presented over the last few years as this unbeatable monster, the superhuman type strength that he possesses, in that guy's no, he would not make a good face of the company. And I say that because it's really hard to keep that kind of character over as a baby face. Even over the course of the summer last year, some of Braun's antics, the turning over the vehicles or whatever, a lot of people were starting to get a little bit tired of that. And if you've noticed, they've kind of trimmed down on that a lot this year. Really, the only strength spots that Braun's had involved Elias using the big bass when he attacked Elias during that little concert segment on Raw a few weeks back. Then he held his car in place, so obviously he's still got a little bit of it going on. But ever since the feud in January where he pulled the scaffolding down, they've really kind of minimized that and have taken to kind of humanizing him a little bit more. They're kind of making him a more personal character. He started to team up with people. Of course, he had the tag team with Bobby Lashley. He was involved in that big 10-man tag on Raw during the week of the Superstar Shakeup. That's definitely contrary to his earlier character where he just didn't want anything to do with anybody. And so they've kind of made Braun more personal, more personable. He's kind of softened a little bit. The stuff with Alexa Bliss during the Mixed Match Challenge was some good character work for him. If they continue to humanize him and they just kind of turn him into a really strong, really tough individual that's hard to beat, yeah, I think he could be a face of the company if they go that direction with him. Now, here's the interesting thing. If they continue to mellow him out, will he remain over? Because one of the things that got him over is the fact that he's just bowling over people and he's completely against type for the other wrestlers on the roster. He just stood out so much by doing these really bizarre feats of strength On Monday night, a great example. He's just sitting there running over people, just bulldozing them, drop kicking them out of nowhere. That kind of action from Braun, that kind of character, that's what got him over this much. And it would be interesting to see if they let him remain that kind of character or if they kind of go a different direction with him. But whether he can sustain his place as the face of the company long term, that's really irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, he could definitely be a champion tomorrow if they wanted him to be. He's that popular. And he could definitely make an argument that he deserves to be champion or at least to be in the conversation. You know, I personally think that Seth Rollins is the better option long term. I think that Seth brings a little bit more to the table than Braun can. I like Braun more as kind of the special attraction, kind of the 1B to Seth Rollins 1A. Uh, and that's another reason that I'm not a big fan of the comparison between Undertaker and Braun Strowman. They do kind of fit the same archetype in the sense of being the special attraction, but Undertaker had a much more important role to play in the company than Braun would. I don't know that Braun would have nearly the same type of staying power that Undertaker did, and quite frankly, Braun Strowman is never going to be as valuable to WWE as Undertaker was over the course of his career. So it's more of a comparison maybe to Randy Orton and John Cena might be a better comparison, even though Braun Strowman wrestles nothing like Randy Orton. Uh, Braun could be the kind of guy that could main event when you need him to. He could be a champion when you need him to be. He's going to be one of the most popular guys in the company, but I think Seth Rollins is better equipped to be the kind of the face of the company. He's a very inspirational wrestler as a babyface. People get behind him. He's a great in-ring worker. He can carry himself well on the microphone. He's got a character that he's really got a character arc that a lot of people really enjoy. This kind of redemption run that he's been on the last year, kind of making up for his past sins, it makes him relatable. And I think when you package that with his looks, his ability to talk, the character work, he's still young enough to carry the ball. He's one of the best in-ring workers they have. People love him. He can play the heel when you need him to play the heel, but he can play a great babyface too. He's very versatile. I like Seth Rollins. I think he offers a little bit more. He could probably be a more direct replacement for Roman Reigns, but whether they go with Braun or Seth, the bottom line is they need to do something. Whether they go with Braun or they go with Seth, they absolutely have to get away from Roman Reigns for a little while. He's just got to go away. He's damaged goods, broken beyond repair at this point. I don't see any way they could salvage Roman without turning him heel. So they really need to consider moving on from Roman. Braun, Seth, maybe Finn Balor. A little bit less sold on Finn. He's just a little bit too small for me. But I mean, he could still be working in the right avenue. If you had a Daniel Bryan type storyline for him, maybe Finn could work. But Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman would definitely be the big two that I would look at, kind of replacing Roman on Raw. And who knows? My theory of having Braun win the title at Money in the Bank and then defending against the heel turn Roman at SummerSlam, that could absolutely be in play. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, I put up a fan series post where Roman would lose the cage match controversially to Brock. Now, I didn't have the scenario right. I had it Roman hitting the floor first, but the referee not seeing it. Well, hell, I guess it was kind of what happened here, too. Just wasn't the same setup. But I had Roman snapping here and beginning a heel turn from this. It would be interesting if this did mark the beginning of a heel turn. If Roman was bitching about being screwed out of the title, that would definitely kind of put him on the Bret Hart trajectory where people would kind of get mad at the complaining. We'll see what happens on that front. So the table is set for some interesting possibilities. But they got to try something new on top. Poor Roman, he's just not the answer right now, and he's not going to be. We'll see where they go. I want to talk briefly about the show itself. Of course, Saudi Arabia paid a lot of money to host this show. It was a very big financial investment on their part in WWE, trying to encourage tourism. We got that what I call a propaganda piece during the show, during that prayer break intermission. It's very much a government attempt, attempt by the Saudi government to kind of make themselves look a little bit better in the eyes of the world. I think working with WWE, trying to get some big events into Saudi Arabia. So that begs the question now, since we have gone past the show, with all the controversy surrounding it, was the show worth it for WWE? Now, from a PR standpoint, the Saudi ministry, government ministry, that released an apology for the offensive material of what it was apparently Carmella on the screen. They issued an apology because of that being played on the screen. It was apparently offensive. Uh, that is not a good look for WWE at all. The big knock on the company going in was they were running a show in a place where the women were not allowed to participate. If you had been to Israel, you weren't allowed into the country, apparently. Sami Zayn, being of Syrian heritage, was not welcome at the show, apparently. That's why he didn't appear. Whether that was a WWE call or Sami's call, we don't know, but that is apparently the reason why Sami wasn't there. Of course, the human rights abuses against the LGBT community in Saudi Arabia, well known. Even Finn Balor, he's been using his rainbow themed gear over the last couple of months. He did not have that in Saudi Arabia. That kind of brought up a stink on Twitter. I'm not going to get into that. It's really not worth dignifying. But, the abuses of human rights, of LGBT rights, of women's rights in Saudi Arabia, that is a very real problem. And it is a subject that needs to be brought up. WWE touts itself as a progressive company with the women's evolution. They've made the women one of the hallmarks of their programming over the last year. Had a lot of milestones for the women. The first Rumble, first Elimination Chamber, one of the best matches at WrestleMania. So, it kind of clashes with their image of being really one of the friendliest companies for women in terms of athletics. I think that WWE is trying to position itself as being one of the premier options for female athletes right now. And Ronda Rousey and Charlotte have a very good shot of main eventing WrestleMania next year. They're putting a lot of time and effort into promoting the women as kind of being at the forefront of this grand revolution in the ring. And yet they're doing business with countries where they're not even allowed to compete. So it's not a good PR look. A lot of people were turned off by that. A lot more people were frustrated with the apology that was offered by the Saudi government after the fact, showing Carmella on the screen in the stadium. It's a terrible look from a PR standpoint. But on the flip side, pragmatically, apparently WWE is getting paid $25 million a year for the next 10 years to run these shows. If you look at WWE's stock price right now, it closed, I actually have it written down here, it closed at an all-time high on Friday. When the markets closed Friday evening, WWE shares were trading for just over $40 a share, $40.31 a share. That's an all-time record high for WWE stock. There are a couple of reasons why that stock price is so high. One of them is the TV deal they're expected to get. They're expected to get a sweetheart deal from Fox in the next couple of weeks. That almost seems to be a done deal at this point. The rumors have been around for so long. I would be shocked if they stayed at NBC Universal. But whether they go to Fox or they stay with NBC, their TV deal is definitely going up. There's almost guarantee of it at this point. So that's one reason the stock price is so high. But another reason, in addition to the WrestleMania boost that they usually get this time of year, the $25 million from the Saudi government to run these shows, that's almost all profit. There are some reports going around that WWE didn't even have to pay for the construction going on at the stadium, that the government itself assumed all the cost for building the sets for the show. So if WWE only had to, transport its crew overseas, they're making a huge chunk of change here from these shows. WWE's responsibility is to its shareholders to maximize profit. and deliver to their shareholders. And, you're going to find out just how much money was involved here as they release their financial information. It'll be in their next financial report. But you're talking about millions of dollars at stake for a company that, is trading at the highest it's ever traded at on Wall Street. These are big financial opportunities. And if you're Vince McMahon, it's really hard to turn down this kind of money. $25 million, you don't even make that kind of scratch at WrestleMania these years. WrestleMania doesn't even make $25 million in pure profit necessarily. It can get close, but, $25 million, that's a huge payday for Vince. That's basically a second WrestleMania. They ran basically 2 WrestleMania events in April. Brought in huge gates for both shows. Made a lot of money working in New Orleans and working in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. You can say what you will about the PR aspects of it, but from the monetary perspective, this was a gold mine for WWE. And it's going to open the door for them doing more shows like this in the future, not only in Saudi Arabia. There's that rumor pay-per-view in Melbourne, Australia, coming this October. That's going to be a possible 100,000 seat venue they're going to try and fill. They could be going to Brazil in the near future. They could be running shows in Mexico City. Obviously, they could always go back to Toronto and the Rogers Center, or they could go to London. They're definitely run shows in England enough to where it would be a possibility to run maybe a pay-per-view in London, maybe a SummerSlam or a Royal Rumble or a Survivor Series in the future. So these international shows are going to increase. The money is there. And Vince is going to go after the money because that's Vince's responsibility. He delivers a profit for his shareholders. Vince's goal is to see that stock price continue to tick up. Because the higher the stock price goes, the better off WWE is going to be. And the better off WWE is, that gives them more financial leverage to expand. They're going to do their big NXT expansion. That's definitely in the works apparently now. Running these international shows, developing the infrastructure to kind of produce their broadcasting around the globe, getting the network out to these different countries. That's not cheap. But WWE, seeing its financial bottom line better and better each year, you just can't turn down the money. From a pragmatic perspective, you have to admire what WWE pulled off here. They had a huge payday. And the people that benefit most directly after the shareholders and the company itself are the performers. All the women that didn't get to go are apparently getting a huge payday from the event. These big shows, especially when they're running these overseas tours of these bigger venues, that's helping the talent. It's not a zero-sum game here. It sucked that the women weren't able to participate in Saudi Arabia, but if they're getting paychecks for the event as if they had worked, then it kind of changes the dynamic a little bit here because now, they're still sharing in the rewards even though they're not able to perform. So they're not losing out on financial opportunities here. But if the show in Saudi Arabia opens up the doors to do shows in places like China, countries that still have issues with human rights, but where the women would ostensibly be able to perform, if the Saudi Arabia show opens the door for a big show in China under the same kind of pretenses, then there's going to be a net win for the company and for the performers. So it's just something to think about. It's kind of a pragmatic look at the show. From a moral standpoint, it's hard to justify running the show in Saudi Arabia. And I definitely don't like using the Rumble moniker or running so close to WrestleMania. But hindsight being 2020, the show itself was a veritable house show. Just an oversized house show. That's pretty much what it was. And so it didn't really overshadow WrestleMania. It didn't really negate what happened in New Orleans. And for that, I'm thankful. It gives me some hope that they have enough sense not to taint WrestleMania like that moving forward. But just looking at the financials on this show, it's absolutely worth considering where this is going to go. in the future because it's a lot of money for WWE. And the healthier WWE is financially, the more WWE can expand. And that's where we're going to see the interesting things happening in NXT. New performance centers being built, more international talent coming in. The more international exposure WWE gets, the more international talent you're going to have. Could see an influx of talent from Japan following the success of performers like Shinsuke Nakamura and Asuka. The Middle East could be a new untapped potential, a new source of talent coming in from Saudi Arabia or Qatar or any other bastion in the Middle East where WWE is making inroads. WWE made a point to visit Africa more frequently here the last few years. You could see more talent from places like South Africa, where they just toured. Wrestling scene in Latin America is getting hot again in places like Chile. You could see some talent coming from South America. Wrestling is getting hot the world over. It's been hot in Japan for several years now. It's been hot in England for several years. You're seeing these hot spots pop up where there's a lot of wrestling content out there, and WWE is riding that wave. They have the UK special coming up that they're going to be running. So, with all WWE's partnerships, the more money they make, the more they can expand. And the more they expand, the more they can do neat stuff like the Mae Young Classic coming up this summer, or the Cruiserweight Classic that we got a few years ago, or the UK tournament. We're seeing WWE think outside the box a little bit more each year. It's not the same WWE that we had 4 years ago at the outset of the network experiment. This is a different beast entirely. And they're running special shows. They're running different events. They're kind of catering to a different type of fan now. They're going after hardcore fans as much as they do their casuals. It's an interesting time. And if running shows in places like Saudi Arabia can, increase their ability to do stuff like that, then, from a pragmatic perspective, these shows have value. They just have to be willing to ride the PR costs related to it. So that's my piece on the Saudi Arabia show. That's the last I'm going to say on it. It was a decent show for what it was. It was kind of a bloated show at 6 hours. There was no need for the show to be that long. The 50-man Rumble, interesting gimmick. Very much a worthless match for the first half of it. It didn't really get good until kind of like the middle part. Even the last third of it really was when it finally kind of picked up. So it's not something I would want to see on the regular. The title matches, better than they were at WrestleMania, bad finishes. The rest of the card was good. Nothing extravagant, but nothing terrible either, except for those botches we talked about. So, overall, it was there. It was a card that happened. And I probably won't watch it again. So take that as an endorsement or lack thereof, as you will. But that was the greatest Royal Rumble. And as they move into the Backlash pay-per-view next week, we get away from the Saudi Arabia show. Hopefully the controversy will kind of die down a little bit. And as we get into Backlash, we're now kind of setting up for the summer months proper. WrestleMania season is now over with. The Greatest Royal Rumble is coming on. Superstar Shakeup is over. The rosters are finalized now. And with Backlash, we start the new co-branded era. We're going to see how things kind of shake out. With the women's division, it's interesting. We have no real firm starting point for the Sasha Bayley feud. I personally thought during the 10-woman tag on Raw that we would see the beginning of the official heel turn for Sasha. It's been teased out a little bit now. Of course, Bayley has been having a little bit of a heel turn teased out herself with the way she's been acting in the back during their interview segment. So whoever's turning heel here, somebody is turning heel. You don't need a heel, to quote my friend Taker's Minion. Not every match needs a heel. But in this feud, somebody's going to turn heel. And my money would have been on Sasha. But the way Bayley's been acting, who knows? Maybe Bayley's the one that goes heel. It'd be an interesting twist. But the problem that we're running into here, and this was something that we spoke about before WrestleMania, and now it's kind of coming back to the forefront. A lot of people were kind of curious why Sasha and Bayley didn't have a match at WrestleMania. They thought that it would be good for the feud to kick off there because Bayley and Sasha, obviously two of the best workers in the company in the women's division, and two of the more popular online. People wanted to see them have their moment at WrestleMania. That didn't happen, and I wasn't too upset about that because the card itself was so bloated. You didn't want them lost in the shuffle on the card. You wanted to give them a chance to kind of breathe and have a better starting point for their rivalry. But we had the tease of it at WrestleMania. We had the tease of it after. They've been teasing this rivalry out for weeks now. And I got to be honest with you, it would appear, judging from crowd reactions, and this is purely subjective, so you may feel free to disagree at your leisure, but I don't know that the crowd is very invested in this storyline anymore. It really feels like the crowd just kind of quit caring. And maybe we've run into a situation here, a scenario. They waited too long to pull the trigger on this feud. They teased it out so much that people just kind of gave up on it and don't really care that much. Bayley and Sasha get good reactions, but they're not anywhere near what they used to be. You know, we're not talking about two transcendent level performers here. Bayley and Sasha, in terms of their popularity, they're definitely among the most popular of the women on Raw, but their reactions are not super great. It really does feel like, you know, WWE may have missed the boat. Maybe they should have pulled the trigger on this feud by now. You know, you can miss a window on these situations sometimes. You can miss your window and miss out on a really good feud. Now, Bayley and Sasha are going to feud this summer at some point. They're both still on Raw. They're both going to be clashing. That's a given. They're going to run this feud, and it's probably going to culminate at SummerSlam. But whether this feud lives up to the hype, that's a different subject entirely. And right now, even I'm starting to see my patience wear a bit thin. They teased this out enough. It's time to get going on this. The only reason that they wouldn't have gone through this by now would be they don't have the confidence to carry this feud over the summer months. They want to get as close to SummerSlam as possible before they pull the trigger. If that's their rationale, they're just going to do more harm than good to this show. They're going to do more harm than good to the feud. They're going to do more harm than good to Bayley and Sasha. It's just going to waste what could be an otherwise exceptionally hot feud between two very talented performers. So we'll see what happens on that front. I would imagine we're not going to wait too much longer before Bayley or Sasha one turn on the other and just kick this into hyperdrive. Because quite frankly, they're running out of ways to tease this out. You know, they've done everything short of just hold up a big sign that say we're stalling here. So we'll see when they decide to actually pull the trigger on that. You know, but that's not the only kind of issue going on in the women's division right now. Ronda Rousey kind of been poking around a little bit here with Natalya over the last few weeks. And Mickie James seems to be set up to be Ronda's next opponent, which could go down as recently or as quickly as this coming Sunday at Backlash. I'll have to check again to see if that match has actually been made official. I'm not sure if it's official yet, but it would seem that we're going towards a Ronda Rousey Mickie James match at some point in the near future. And it's all building to what you would expect to be a heel turn for Natalya. She's been a face ever since she came back to Raw. Ronda came out to help Natalya on Monday night. Natalya was kind of cheap shotted by Mickie James, who went after her knee. Natalya sold a knee injury. This match, this 10-woman tag, was very interesting. Alexa Bliss had actually gotten some positive reactions from the fans for her backstage interview segments where she called Nia Jax a bully. A lot of people were concerned that people were going to kind of turn on Nia, but Nia got a big reaction from the crowd. She's doing just fine as a babyface champion. They don't need to worry too much about those reactions, I don't believe. But you have the situation with Nia and Alexa that's still simmering there. Ronda came out to help Natalya and then got into the ring and gave Mickie James an armbar. This whole match just kind of got thrown out, but we have different scenarios kind of floating around right now in the women's division on Raw. A lot of angles that are kind of taking shape. And that's led a lot of people to ask whether Ronda is kind of cutting in line here or leapfrogging people. And I'm not going to talk very long on this because I think it's a stupid discussion personally. Ronda Rousey is a mainstream star. She's bringing mainstream attention to WWE. She already has. All the outlets that covered her in the build up to WrestleMania. Ronda's a star. She's a legit athlete. She's not a celebrity. She's not a movie star coming in and taking a spot. She's a legit athlete that's raising the stature of the people that she works with. Nobody cared about Natalya before she came over to Raw and started this program with Ronda Rousey. But this is going to put Natalya in the best spot she's been in years. This is going to be the highest profile match Mickie James has had in years. Ronda Rousey is making the people she works with better than they are. Maybe not in terms of their quality as in-ring workers, but she's definitely raising their stature. She had a lot of eyeballs on her at WrestleMania, and she delivered big time. She had one of the best matches, if not the best match, at WrestleMania. And people raved about her performance. She's not getting the backlash from the crowds right now. She's still very popular with the live crowds. It's not a case of people turning on her. She's getting the correct response. And she's looked very good in limited action over the last few weeks. But Ronda Rousey is putting eyeballs on the product. Her segments are some of the highest rated on social media. She's still drawing attention. No, it might not be where WWE wants it to be, but Ronda Rousey is probably one of the top 5 stars on Raw right now, and she hasn't barely done anything. In terms of the reaction she gets, she's probably the 4th most popular person on that show. She's definitely the most popular female performer. She gets the loudest reactions. You could argue that Finn Balor might be a little bit more popular. I would say Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman definitely are. So she's in the top 5 there. She is definitely in the top 5, if not higher up, in terms of popularity. Ronda's not leapfrogging anybody. She's making the people that she's working with look really good because she's getting them extra visibility. Natalya is going to have the best run of her career with Ronda Rousey, just by virtue of Ronda's star power. Anybody that works with Ronda is going to get that rub, at least for the short term. So I don't really give any credence to this whole talk of her leapfrogging or her taking a spot from somebody more deserving. You know what? The more deserving argument is the lamest argument in wrestling. Nobody deserves anything if you really think about it. It's scripted TV. WWE sets it up. It's not a matter of somebody working hard enough to earn it. I mean, you can make that case occasionally, but in general, it's WWE setting things up for success. It's just a TV program. It's not a matter of earning a spot. It's a matter of having the talent to carry yourself in a spot. Ronda is given a spot. She's got a prominent spot, and so far she's delivered. And as long as she keeps delivering in that spot, I have no problem with her being there. That's how she earns her spot, by continuing to do a good job. She has credibility already established from her career as an Olympian and as the UFC champion. It's not a matter of credibility. It's a matter of people seeing their favorites get passed over. Well, that sucks. I'm not going to say it don't, but you don't put that on Ronda. It's not Ronda's fault WWE has done jack all with the women's division. It's not on Ronda that WWE has made Bayley and Sasha Banks look like complete and utter tools. Ronda came in to do a job, and she's done that job admirably. And she's going to main event WrestleMania one day. You can take it to the bank. As long as she stays healthy, she's main event in Mania. And it may be as soon as next year. And she will deserve that spot because Ronda Rousey is a star. And she's making the people she works with into stars. Case closed. That's all I have to say about that. That is the show for this week. I'm going to close out with the WWE Network match of the week. I promised you it would be from 1998, the heart of the Attitude Era. It's from Over the Edge 98. And if you're an NXT fan, you might recall a title match from a few years ago with Bayley defending her title against Eva Marie. And if you watch that match, you realize that WWE was kind of stacking the deck against Bayley. They wanted Eva to win the title, and it kind of felt like this, this controversial match where Bayley was going to get screwed out of her championship. The format for that match comes from a match in 1998 between Steve Austin and Dude Love at Over the Edge 98. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I want you to go find this match. It's the main event of the May pay-per-view from 1998, so you'll find it in the network archives. But check this main event out. Dude Love and Steve Austin. Obviously, Mick Foley and Steve Austin, two of the preeminent workers of the Attitude Era, had a tremendous brawl. This was the quintessential brawl all over the arena type match. But the gimmick behind the match, Vince McMahon, of course, is now fully invested in this war against Steve Austin. And he's trying to stack the deck. It's just a tremendous show. It's a fun show. This main event, one of the best main events of the entire Attitude Era. And I'm not going to spoil any more of it for you because we've already gone too long here tonight. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Dude Love from Over the Edge 98 is our WWE Network match of the week. If you've never seen it, go watch it. It's a great match, and you're going to really enjoy some of the shenanigans going on. It's one of the loudest crowds you'll ever hear for a wrestling show, too. So, Over the Edge 98, Steve Austin versus Dude Love for the WWE Championship in the main event. That is our network match of the week. Guys, it's been a long night. It's been a good show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in here tonight. We've had some people in the live stream, had a few others come and go. Again, a congratulations to John for winning our trivia challenge. I'll be sending you an email tomorrow morning. I'll get your mailing address. We'll get this stuff sent out to you. Hope you enjoyed this stuff. We'll be doing more trivia contests on the regular weekly show. Definitely check out our affiliated shows that we plugged earlier on in the evening. We'll be back Monday for another episode of the Connoisseurs of Wrestling, focusing on the late, great Bruno Sammartino. I'll be back with Ryan Sayo next Thursday for the ordinary time slot for the Queen City Express. Guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. It's been fun. Closing time here for the last call. We'll see you later.